I am pleased, honored, excited to present to you guest of honor for writing, Sarah Gailey. Sarah Gailey is a Hugo Award-winning and best-selling author of speculative fiction, short stories, and essays. They have been a finalist for the Hugo, Nebula, and Locus Awards for multiple years running. Their best-selling adult novel debut, Magic for Liars, was published by Tor Books in 2019. Their most recent novel, Just Like Home, and first original comic book series with Boom Studios, Eat the Rich, are available now. Their shorter works and essays have been published in Mashable, the Boston Globe, Vice, Tor.com, and The Atlantic. Their work has been translated into 7 different languages and published around the world.
Thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm so excited to be here. Flights of Foundry is amazing, and I'm really honored to be a guest of honor. That's why it's in the name.
Well, you are awesome and honorable, and we are so excited to have you here and listen to all of the cool stuff about you for an hour. It is great. All right. So let's get started with some career questions. You have 8 published books by my count, if I can count, which, I have children, one hopes, but nevertheless. They range from riding hippos down the Mississippi to creepy serial killer house suspense stories. What are some of the stories behind these stories and how each of them became something that you wanted or needed to write?
Oh gosh. There's so many. the the thing that drives a lot of my work is a sense of stubbornness. Um, I have a tendency to pursue work that either someone has told me I can't write, or that a little voice inside my head says people think you won't be able to do this. Um, is part of why my work ranges so broadly, because once I have written something in a certain genre or in a certain area, I kind of feel like it's understood that whether you think I did a good job or a bad job at it, I did it. And so after that, I'm like, well, I either have the option of trying to do better than the thing I did before, or of trying to do something new. And usually something new has kind of more draw for me. Also because I don't know, I really struggle with this thing that I think a lot of writers deal with, where when I look back at my old work, and since I'm always trying to do better, my old work becomes worse in my mind. I like whenever I actually go back and revisit it and reread it, I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty good. But I'm trying to do a better job on the thing I'm doing now than what I did before. And it's easier to have a sense of like appreciation for what I've done if I'm kind of going in some different directions. So I'm like, well, this, it's not like Magic for Liars isn't necessarily better than River of Teeth. It's different. It's a different length. It's a different genre. Um, and I think that that drives a lot of what I do. I also am just I am incapable of not working and not writing. Um, this is like the journey of my life is trying to figure out, okay, you found your calling, now how do you not do it? And so I also have some kind of external motivation put on me to write different things because my novel publisher can only publish one novel at a time. I work with Tor books for my novels for grown-ups, and with in the past with Simon Pulse for my YA, and with Boom for my comics, and with Tor.com for novellas, and then whoever will have me for short fiction. And I can't, go to Boom, who's already publishing one comic series, and say, hey, I have another comic series that needs to go right now. So I've sort of got like a spell slot for each genre and medium that I can fill, and that puts some constraints. So when I'm feeling the itch, when I'm like working on a novel and I'm like, ooh, but I have another idea that I really want to dive into, it's like, okay, where does that go? Where do I have room on the map right now?
And do some of those ideas feel like they have to be a certain form such that you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to hold on to that one because I don't have the space and time for it right now. And even if you don't, do you just like, I'm gonna write it anyway, whatever. They'll slot it in when they can.
Almost always the idea is married to a form, which is very annoying sometimes because sometimes I'm like right now, I need to come up with an idea in a certain form, for the contracts that I'm on with that publisher, they have the option for the next project, and so I need to have another idea in the form that that contract's about. And I've got some time, but so far in that time, I've come up with ideas in literally every other form and medium that I work in.
Oh no.
And I'm like, hey, can any of you become this thing that I need to come up with? And all those ideas are like, no.
No,
What's wrong with
absolutely
you?
not.
The only exception is I have a project that at the end of 2020, when all of us were unwell and putting a lot of work and effort into a project that wasn't on contract anywhere yet. That's not poor professional judgment in general for everybody. It is for me because right now I have contracts that I need to fulfill. And so the best use of my time is fulfilling those contracts and not, for example, sitting down and writing an entire novel that I didn't have anywhere to go. And in that time, I wrote a project that no one who publishes the form that the project is in has room for. All of them, everyone who have taken it to have been like, "Oh, this is really interesting and cool," but our calendar is full, and so you would have to wait, like a really long time, 2-3 years. And I'm quite impatient, and so I've been like, what if I converted it into a different form? And I've been trying to play around with format, being like, okay, what if this is actually meant to be a comic or a graphic novel? What if this is actually meant to be, you God help us, a screenplay? And that's been really interesting, just seeing what does it take to convert this into that. And there are some things that it can't change into, there are some things that it can. And getting to work with that is like both very annoying because I want it to just be sold already, and very cool and interesting as a creator.
Yeah, that's like it's one of those good problems to have, right? That you have so much work contracted, which means people love you and want to give you money, but also, your brain is not complying. Um, so, I am going to talk now about sort of your short fiction and your essays. Are there any pieces that you are especially proud of, or ones that you wish more people knew about? Like you may be best known for, oh, the Hippo book, or Magic for Liars, or stuff like that. But in terms of your short fiction and essays, are there things that you like to refer back to, like people to read? And secondary question about that is, would you say is your process for working on shorter work, essays, short stories, different from novel writing or comic book writing?
Oh gosh. Okay. Don't let me lose track of any of those pieces of the question.
I'm here to help, don't worry.
I'm counting on you. Um, in terms of pieces that I wish more people would read, I wrote there's two that I really wish people would read, and one of them is this kind of celebration of Michael Ende's Neverending Story that I got to write on the or for the 40th anniversary of the release of the book. That's right, 40th anniversary. It was for the anniversary of the release of the book, and I got to listen to it. I got to listen to the entire book, listen to the audiobook. It takes. Are we a swearing conference?
I actually don't know the answer to that
Okay.
question. We
I'm
will
gonna
assume
say
no, but we'll find out. Yeah. Or
yeah.
no, go ahead.
It takes a rootin' tootin' long time to listen to that book. Um, and then I did a bunch of research into the author's life and discovered that he grew up in Germany during World War II. Um, and he saw his father's art community labeled as degenerates. And he saw what fascism did to a thriving artistic community and creative community that was, really incredible and vital, beautiful, must be disintegrated. And so I wrote this long form piece that was about how his life and his childhood in a fascist country informed this legendary work of fiction. And like nobody has read that piece. Like I love that piece. I'm so proud of it. I did so much research for it. And I also think it is so relevant because America is in the place right now that Germany was in when Michael Ende was a kid. Um, and we're seeing the things that happened to his father happen to our communities. And on the one hand, it's like this man was brutally traumatized for the entire rest of his life. He saw a tornado of fire when an area that he had moved to for safety was being bombed. He saw his friends get conscripted to serve a fascist army for fascist purposes and saw bodies hanging in the streets of people who were dodging that draft. He saw all this. He was hurt by it in a way that never went away. And at the same time, he brought himself into a future where he could live alongside that pain. And I think that there is so much to be taken from an understanding of the absolute horrors of the reality of fascism and not looking away from those and not trying to sanitize or romanticize them and looking at the future of people who are hurt, who survive, and who make their way um, into a world beyond that pain. And I don't know. I just want more people to know about that. And then for fiction, I really loved my published somewhere else. You have to buy the anthology to read them. I read earlier today from Jonathan Strahan's Book of Dragons, which is an amazing anthology with like all your favorite writers in it, plus me. And it has a short story in it that I'm very proud of called We Don't Talk About the Dragon. And I wish people would read that. And then also from Jonathan Strahan, Tomorrow's Parties, which is a wonderful, wonderful book about life in the Anthropocene and has a story in it that I wrote about what it's like to live in a company town underwater as a disabled person in the future, trying to work enough to get medical treatment. And I just love both those stories. I think I did a good job. I want people to read them.
I've linked all the things in chat for the record, so.
Thank you. You're a hero. For process, could not be more different. Essays and short stories for me are like night and day to books. Increasingly, I'm trying to bring my book process into my short story process to make it more sustainable because historically, the way I write a book is that I have a big monstrous spreadsheet and I put all of the plot beats into the spreadsheet and then I say, what do I need my final word count to be? And then I try and like figure out about how many words each of those plot beats needs to be in order for me to come somewhere close to my target word count. And then I track all of the plots and subplots that I need to be seeding throughout the book to make sure you've got enough information about each of them happening, because I do tend to forget that I need to be writing about plot A when I get really like excited about plot B. And then plot C will come up and I'm like, ooh, and plot A and B are like, can you pay attention to us? And I have another part of the spreadsheet where I keep track of all the character details and all of their like physical features and stuff, because I don't have a functioning memory. Trauma destroyed that part of my brain. And so I need the help keeping everything straight. And with short stories, historically, what I do is I open up a document and I title it like something like Uncanny Story Title TK. And then I stare at the open document for a while. And then I go on Tumblr and I look at a bunch of Tumblr posts and I go, interesting, interesting. And then I close Tumblr and I go back to the open document and I stare at it for a little while longer. And then I go on Twitter and I look at some things and I go, I shouldn't be on this website. And then I go off Tumblr and I go back to the document and I look at it and I type a sentence and I'm like, I'm gonna write the best first sentence ever. And I hate it and I delete it and I get up and I stomp around my house for 12 to 18 hours saying, I don't know how to write. I don't have any more stories to write. I'm done as a writer. I'm done doing it. I'm never doing it again. People will be so relieved. They won't have to read my stories anymore. I'm not doing this. I can't do it. I'll tell them that I quit. And my beloved, beautiful, gentle, kind partner looks at me and says, okay, love you. do you need anything? And I say, no, I need to quit and never write again. And my partner says, okay, go let him know. And sometimes we'll say, you do know how to write, you can do it. Um, Increasingly these days, more of the former than the latter. Um, until finally I'll sit down and go, fine, forget it. I'll just write a terrible story and everyone will hate it. And then usually that's it. That's the process. And lately I'm trying really hard to open that document and be like, here are the plot beats that I know need to happen in the story. Here's how many words I should aim at for each plot beat to make sure I hit my word count. And then, like, of course, I ignore all of that and write the story anyway, but it cuts down the process by like 12 hours.
Yeah, like even if you're not going to use it, just the fact that you did it means you got it out of your head. You've like
Yeah.
talked yourself through, and then you're good.
Yeah. Well, and I have this thing that I've started doing to get through really unpleasant stuff. I've had to have a ton of medical tests lately, and they've been extremely physically unpleasant. And I've started doing like, like, okay, if I can get through 1 minute of this, it'll almost be over. Like medical tests tend to be very short. They try and keep them as short as possible. And so I'll just count that minute. And I do that with that word count. I have like, okay, plot beat 1 needs to be 250 words. I can write 250 words and then I'll quit writing forever and ever. And that it helps get things moving a little bit. And then you get some momentum and then all of a sudden you've written a story.
Yeah, it's bite-sized pieces, right? It's just like you eat the elephant. Well, don't eat elephants, but
But if you have to, if
but if
you're
you
in
have to,
a kind of a saw trap situation where if you don't eat an elephant, your butt will get cut off, then one bite at a time. You're right.
it's a very Candide plot point. Ouch. So okay, we've done novels, we've done short fiction, essays. You also, as previously noted, have and you've also worked on comic books for IP like Steven Universe and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Can you talk about the what it was like coming up with your own original stuff for that, and also what it's like to play in other people's sandboxes, and how different is it for you making these kind of visual works versus making books, short stories, stuff that's just textual?
It's so different. It's a totally different world. I love it so much. Um, the big difference between writing comics and writing prose fiction is the sense of collaboration. All writing is a collaboration. Anybody who says that they, as a writer, create something completely by themselves is almost certainly being, at the very least, dishonest with themselves or ill-informed. Because all like prose writing is a collaboration between the author, the editor, the copy editor, the publicity department. If you're working in traditional publishing, sales and marketing, like it's all a collaboration, right? This book, just like home, I wrote the words that are inside, except my editor told me these words need to be different. This whole section needs to be different. This needs to change. And we work together to decide how it changes. But that guidance steers the words that are inside. And then the copy editor and the line edits change the word choice that's inside. And then the sales and publicity department helps pick the title. And then the marketing department helps decide how the package is going to go out into the world. And, the art on the cover and the entire package design influences how I hold it and how I treat it and who reads it. And then the reader's brain filters it, and so that it's all a collaboration. But in prose writing, almost all that collaboration happens in the back end. I sit at my computer and I like eat jelly beans and write a whole lot of words, and then I give them to someone and the collaboration starts. In comics, I'm gesturing over here because like all my comics are either over here or in storage boxes down here where you can't see. In comics, the collaboration happens more up front. For Eat the Rich and Know Your Station, the collaboration happened at different points. In Eat the Rich, I was so fortunate to be working with editor Matt Levine, who, as far as I know, no longer works in comics, but who was an editor at Boom Studios, and who helped me learn about the world of comics, who helped me understand a little bit more of what I was getting into when we started developing Eat the Rich together. And he helped me this medium because I was very much thinking in prose terms. And then I wrote the scripts and he helped reshape them. He said, you know, like this pacing needs to be different. You need to have a big pause here for a reader to sink into. Um, and then that script went to the artist. And the collaboration between a writer and an artist in comics, I can't overemphasize, both are building the story at the same time. The writer kind of comes up with the ideas and comes up with the language, but the artist delivers all the visual language and tells a story through their art that is perfectly meshed with the story that the writer is telling. So like, and then the letterer, also the colorist and the letterer both add layers of storytelling, right? And Know Your Station, the colors tell their own entire really vibrant story. Rebecca Nalty brought that to the page. And the letterers tell a story by guiding how quickly you read through a conversation, where you sort of hear language in your mind, and the atmospheric noise of a scene. So it's really different process. In Know Your Station, I got to collaborate with my amazing co-creator, Liana Kangas, who's also the artist on the series, to steer the story in a direction that we thought would be interesting and surprising for readers, even if those readers felt really genre savvy and really like they understood what they were reading and maybe the story was going to be a little too easy for them. And then my editor at Boom, who I'm working with now, Elizabeth Bry, also steered the story. Elizabeth Bry was the one who said that the original ending we came up with was not shocking enough. And so we switched it up and changed it in issue 5 to be more interesting. And those processes are like just so deeply collaborative. It's so rewarding to me in comics to get to work so closely with people who are so good at their jobs and who know what they're doing to build a story together. I don't know, it's just very cool.
And is there any hope or plan for extending out of those? Because obviously they're both basically miniseries, and so they have a sort of arc in the same way that a novel would have an arc or short story would have an arc. But are there any thoughts about continuing with more in those worlds, maybe?
Not as of right now. As of right now, Eat the Rich and Know Your Station both have kind of said what they're there to say.
Mhm,
And I worry that trying to expand those stories more would undermine the impact of what they're trying to say.
mhm,
Um, this is how I feel about all my work, though. Everything that I've written, um, I always feel like, well, it did what it needed to do,
mhm.
and I never want to cut anything off because who knows? Maybe 6 months from now, I'll go, oh my gosh, there's something that Eat the Rich wanted to do that it didn't get to do. But I am really hoping to work more with Liana, and I can't say anything else beyond that, but we're having some really exciting conversations.
NDA, 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 always, all the way down the line. And I mean, hey, that's what fanfic is for, right? Like anybody else who feels like, oh, I wish you had covered this thing or this angle, AO3 exists. So,
That's what I always say. I can't read fan fiction of my own work,
no.
but I want it to exist. And that is why in River of Teeth, when Hero and Winslow realize that there's only one bed in the room, the door closes, and it's so that fanfic writers.
I mean, now I'm gonna go look for that because I want to know. I'm not gonna write it myself, but I would love to read it. Um, because yeah, I'm a fade to black person myself, so like, yeah. Um, so some authors, aka me, struggle to figure out how to newsletter, how to do the newsletter as a form. But you absolutely have turned it into an art form. Your newsletters are amazing. How did you start out with your newsletter, come up with your approach to doing the newsletter, and how do you keep finding cool things to share with your newsletter subscribers?
Thank you so much for saying that it's good. That means the world to me. I started my newsletter under a different name than it's under now. Um, Basically at the business advice of someone who's of what the strategic value of a newsletter is for someone who works in traditional publishing or self-publishing. Basically, there's a sort of funnel that you can build of people's interest. And the wider the mouth of that funnel is, the better, right? This is why having a big social media following is really useful, because that's a very wide mouth of the funnel. Lots of people can fall into it. But the little mouth of that funnel at the bottom needs to be directed to your work for the most part. People's interest shows up from over here and over here and over here, and they need to end up at buy my book in order for your water to stay running, and in order for me to keep on having this career, I need people to buy my books. That's just like how things work. And the problem with that wide mouth is that if you don't narrow it down to the buy my book point, people can just fall right through, and they fall on either side of your book, and then your book doesn't get bought, and then you have to find another job. The purpose of the newsletter is that it captures all of the people who come in the mouth of the funnel. People fall in the mouth of the funnel from Tumblr or Instagram or whatever, and then they sign up for the newsletter, and then the newsletter is that little mouth of the funnel. It goes in their inbox and it says, hey, I have a new book. Do you want to buy it? It captures the interest and crystallizes it in the moment of interest, and then you can save it as like interest jerky to chew on later. That's the strategic value. That's not all the value of a newsletter. It's just like the business strategy from a publicity perspective and a marketing perspective. So that's why I started the newsletter. I started it to be like, okay, we need a way to capture that interest and have it hang in there. So when I did that all the way back in 2016, 2017, very long time ago, all the way back in like MailChimp days, when I did that, I was sending like 1 or 2 emails a month, because the prevailing wisdom at that time was, if you send too many emails, people will unsubscribe. Every time you send an email is an opportunity for someone to unsubscribe. Don't send too many. So that's what I was doing back then. And I was generating all my own content. I was generating like short stories and poems and little essays and stuff like that. Really fun. That's also some stuff that I kind of wish more people would read, because I'm like, I wrote some pretty good stories and some pretty cool essays. And I also was having more fun in my writing back then. I was more silly. But so like that was where it started. But then the current bane of the internet, Substack, showed up. And they contacted me and said, hey, would you want to start a Substack? They did not offer me any upfront money, but they said, would you be interested? I got on a phone call with them. I said in that phone call, what are you committing to do to prevent your platform from becoming overrun by right-wing fascist maniacs? And they made all these promises that were like, cotton candy, absolutely nothing. They're little cowards. But I said, okay, this sounds like a cool model. I signed up, and the discoverability was like a bonanza. A huge amount of people signed up for this newsletter, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do more with this visibility than just maintain it as a funnel. And at the time, Substack's model was you need to be sending out 2 to 3 emails every week, because you're asking people to pay money, and you need this to take the place of them seeing you elsewhere. You need it to be of value. I couldn't do that, so I was like, I'll do 1 a week. And even that was like a lot. But in order to do 1 a week, I needed like interesting stuff to talk about. And I just don't know that much stuff. So I needed to look at other sources. And it was fine for a long time. It was fun even. I did oh gosh, what did I do during that first couple of years? I did like recipes, I did essays, I did live subscriber chats. And it was going great, but it wasn't quite, there was something not quite clicking. Um, and then, gosh, was it still at Substack when I did the personal canons series? I think it was, where there was this big honking discourse on book Twitter about what is the canon of genre fiction. What do you have to have read? What are the great books? And of course, like, you know what people were recommending. They were like, oh, this is Heinlein. Heinlein's fine. It's fine. But everyone was disagreeing. And I was sitting there in my little queer philosophy of life universe, and I was like, well, all these people are disagreeing because canon only exists for purposes of Catholic tradition. Like, that's that's it. And even then, like, there were schisms about what the canon is. So why would we think that we can all agree on something that doesn't actually have a dogma to it? Um, and I ended up inviting a bunch of people to write guest essays about their personal canons. I set aside a budget to pay contributors. Some people offered to write contributions for free. Other people offered to send money so that I could buy more essays, and it turned into a large series. And it was all these brilliant minds talking about what to them constitutes canon, what influenced them as readers, for better or for worse. Some people talked about creators who they can't support anymore, who influenced them a great deal, and what it's like to wrestle with that. Um, and that changed how I thought about the newsletter. That made me go, this is right. That felt right. It was like what I always have wanted to do with any amount of visibility is point to others and say, here's what other people are doing. Here's amazing work that you can support. And this had become a big newsletter to become something that people were really paying attention to. And I all of a sudden had the opportunity to be like, here's an essay from a writer who's never published anything before. Here's an essay from someone who doesn't even consider themselves a writer who does this other important work that you should pay attention to. And it was great. It was amazing. It was so fantastic. So I was like, okay, I want to keep doing that. Well, then Substack was revealed to be giving huge monetary advances to some of the worst monstrous people in the world, people who are actively calling for the deaths of large swathes of my community. And I said goodbye and went and started a platform on Ghost. And I think it's right around that time, maybe a little before, that I changed the name of the newsletter. Oh God, I'm completely forgetting like a whole other part of this, which is that at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was freaking out and was like, I don't want to go to the grocery store. We don't know if we'll die if we go to the grocery store. So we're all trying to cook using the things that are in our cupboards. And everybody was like, I have things that I don't know what to do with. And I love cooking, and I'm pretty good at it. So I ran a series called Stone Soup, where people would send me an email with whatever they didn't know what to do with, and I would come up with a recipe for them to use that would hopefully use the things that they had available. And that also was so fun. I did one a day for a while because I was losing it because it was the start of the pandemic. Um, and then started doing them, every couple days and once a week. And then finally people had got the hang of how to cook and survive in the pandemic. So I stopped the series. But I came to a point where I needed a new name for the newsletter because someone with a much larger online profile than me had started their own newsletter after I had, and their newsletter had the same name as mine. And they noticed after quite some time and said, hey, this seems weird. And I said, yeah, I've been wanting to change it for a little while, but I don't really know if it would be weird to change it. But now that you know that, this had the same name as yours, like, it's already weird, so I'll just change it. And I changed it to Stone Soup because that recipe series embodied everything I wanted to do with my newsletter. I wanted to support a community in the way they needed to be supported and the time they needed to be supported. And that's become what it's about. Every August or so, I sit down and I say, what do I want next year to be? What do I want to have in here? 2 years ago, I did a series that was, I think it was all year. Yeah, it was all year, where I invited people on to do a little world building exercise. This year, I'm doing the Personal Cannons Cookbook, where people are sharing essays and recipes for foods that have meant a lot to them, that have shaped and defined themselves to their communities and their communities to them. And like that's all I want to be doing with this. Every Friday I send out the Stone Soup Digest, which features books that are coming out, books I'm reading, interesting things that are happening in the community and around the internet. And every now and then I like, hey, I wrote a book, will you buy it?
Incidentally, by the way, and
That's a
Carrie,
very long answer. I'm
yeah,
sorry. I'm
oh,
passionate about this.
no, this is literally your show. Like you answer, please. We want to hear from you. This is the point of this. And Carrie asked if the archive is available anywhere of the previous iterations of your newsletter, or have those gone the way of the dinosaur?
It is all available. It's all at stone-soup.ghost.io. And you can get the full archive. And there's at the top of the landing page, there's like sections. So you'll see Building Beyond, which is the world building series. You'll see Personal Cannons. You'll see, I don't know, all the other stuff I've done on there.
All the things. Just read them all. It will be great.
And it goes all
Um,
the way back. It goes all the way back to the beginning.
yeah. So I actually, real quick, we are at 35, 37. So if anyone has questions, once again, please, you can put them in the chat and I will take a look at them and I will pass them on and we'll continue. But meanwhile, while you are getting your questions together, my next question was actually about what you already brought up, which was the Personal Cannons Cookbook. What made you decide to collect personal essays about cooking and food? I mean, it feels like an obvious answer given all the things you've said so far, but and then maybe more differently, what was your editorial process like in choosing which things to include?
You know what? It wasn't obvious. Like it should be, right, in hindsight. But it took me a long time to come up with this concept, and it took the help of a friend because I was sitting there going, like what will people actually want to read? What what fits with my brand? I have a weird brand. I have a brand that like kind of is all over the place. Um, and as a result, I as a person am kind of the locus of that brand. It's like, here's a comic book, but it's a Sarah Gailey comic book, so I hope you like me enough to buy it. Um, and with this, I was like, oh gosh, I'm gonna have a year where I don't have a prose book coming out. I'm gonna have a year where I don't have any big prose projects that people are gonna be able to see. It's all gonna be me working. And at the same time, I have a lot of work to do, so I can't be an essay series that I'm writing all of on my own. And so I knew I wanted to highlight voices that aren't mine. And I knew that I wanted to be not writing about, featuring people's kind of internal personal perspective. I always like to focus on the personal because I don't believe in feeding the discourse engine. And I don't believe in highlighting people who are trying to voice universal rules, right? We all are our own little planets, and that's what I want to talk about is the uniqueness of those. And that's how we landed here. Um, Another part of this is that I write about food and cooking a lot. I write, especially in my newsletter, I share a lot of recipes. I've shared so many. And last year, I was sharing a lot of recipes that were my own that I was coming up with. And I hit the limit of what interesting things my perspective on food has to highlight to my readers. I'm just one guy, and my perspective on food is white and Western. And, I eat broadly and I try to cook broadly, but there's only so much there. And I was like, boy, if I'm going to keep talking about food, I don't want to talk about my food anymore. I want to talk about your food. What do you eat? What food is important to you? What food do you have strong opinions about? And what are those opinions? And so I put this series together, and the editorial process was terrifying. I'm not an editor by trade. At this point, I'm kind of an editor by mistake with this newsletter. And so I don't have the chops and the skills to know how to set this up well in a way that won't, for example, leave me needing to read, I want to say at least 100 essays in a week. Um, but I set up an inbox and people sent their ideas and their work over the course of a month. Um, I read every single one. They were amazing. They were amazing. The worst part was having to say no to any of them because they were fantastic. And so there were a few in there that were like, this is a standout. This is a definite yes. And then I went through and I said, okay, how do we make sure that we are hearing from a lot of different voices? How do we make sure that we're hearing from a lot of cuisines? How do we make sure that we have a lot of different courses? Um, I ran this in December, so there were like 20 essays about cookies. And I had to say, okay, we can't do 20 essays about cookies. This was during the pandemic, so there were a lot of sourdough and pickle recipes. And I said, okay, we have to be careful with that. Then I screened for safety. There were some lacto fermentation recipes and some distillation recipes. And I had to say, I love this. It's really cool. I personally accept full responsibility for the safety of people who follow the instructions that are in something I publish. And since I don't know enough about lacto fermentation to be able to provide safety guidelines that are universally applicable, I don't feel comfortable publishing this, but can we talk later about whether or not it could be viable once I've educated myself more? And then I sent out a personal rejection to everybody who I had to say no to, very honestly telling them, like, this piece is good. These pieces were really good. This recipe is good. Um, and it's just only due to budget and editorial constraints that I can't publish them all.
Yeah, having to do that, having to give that no is just so heartbreaking in a lot of ways. Like it's heartbreaking on both sides, obviously, but it's like, oh, I want to have all of you. It's
Terrible. It was terrible. Also, I'm a very shy person. I'm extremely anxious and very shy. And I had to solicit some people. I solicited, ahead of time because you want to make sure that you've got some anchors in the series. And that was terrifying. There are a couple of people who never responded who I'm still like, oh my God, am I dead to them? Because I had the gall to ask if I could pay them for writing work. Um, but I did get to, I feel like I got to level up some of my courage by actually going and asking some folks.
as opposed to like a roguelike where it's like, oh, I just died and then now I have to start over. Forget it. Like, no, I'm better. I'm getting better. So this is a question from the audience, which you may not be able to answer because sometimes things are NDA, but can you tell us what you're working on right now in specific or generality, or is the answer no?
I can tell you, what I'm working on right now, but I can only keep it so general that I feel like it's going to be worse than if I didn't answer. Currently, I am working on a comic miniseries, a graphic novel, a novella, a novel, a short story, a short story series, and oh my gosh, I'm missing one. Come on, Gailey. Use that brain. A YA novel. 2 YA novels.
There's so many things. Do you work on them one at a time, or do you just like round robin, whatever you feel like today?
I usually work on one at a time, but I kind of like I pitch a bunch
Mhm,
and then I schedule when I'm gonna work on things and I have to work on them in kind of chunks.
mhm, mhm. No, that totally makes sense. Ah, that's so many things. That's amazing. You are amazing. I feel like I've said that several times already, but it's still true. So we have just enough time, I think, for one more question, and I am going to go with because this is actually something that you could take so much time to answer. So this is a terrible question to end when. Um, People will say write what you know, other people will say write what interests you, but like what interests you beyond food, I guess? What hobbies do you hyper focus on? Like what media are you consuming right now? What music? What research rabbit holes are you diving down into? The biggest question ever.
Um, this is like a question that I talk about a lot in therapy because I've been trying for the last 5 years or so to pick up a hobby, and I just cannot seem to do it. Um, I really need one. I need things to do that aren't work, but I'm in this weird fly trap of having found my calling and my passion, and somehow I struck the bullseye of that Venn diagram between like what you like doing, what you're good at, and what makes you money. I hit it right there, and I can't get out. I need to find things to do that like I like doing, and maybe I'm not good at them, and they don't make any money, but I just enjoy them. But every time I try, something in my brain is like, yeah, but you could be writing right now. So, I mean, I love reading. Reading is kind of my job. It's an important part of my job. There's this big discourse about, whether or not writers have to read, and I think that any question about do people have to do the thing is a foolish, useless question. But I also, for me, in my writing, in my career, and in my process, reading is absolutely a necessary part of it. Um, I love reading. I love gardening, but I've been too physically I'm disabled and it's been too much lately for me to do that. So it's a lot of like looking at the garden wistfully at the window. And I love cooking. Cooking is like one of my favorite things in the whole world to do. And I'm only just starting to kind of categorize this as a passion and an interest, but I love tending to my friendships. I'm I'm a very passionate friend. I'm very invested in and loyal to my friends. My bar for what constitutes a friend is excruciatingly low. I'm like I'm like, we know each other. That's enough. That's it. It's done. We're friends. Um, and I love tending to those friendships. I love caring for the people who I'm connected to and who are in my community.
And that feels like a very pandemic, like good thing to pick up too, where it's like all we have is each other, right? You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have 2 minutes left. This is the last chance for anyone who asks a question. Probably will not have time to get to it because in 2 minutes, what can we do? Oh, now it's one. Well, I am going to link your website here in the chat real
Thank
quick.
you.
Yep. And
Can
so,
I actually can I steal that last 1 minute?
yes, please.
Okay. So this is not about me and my work. But Missouri, which is a state in the US where I live, uh, the attorney general of that state has just passed an emergency rule that drastically restricts the ability of trans people to get the medical care that they need. And if you are watching this and you live in the US or have access to US resources, please help. Missouri has a huge trans population that really deserve our care and our help, and they need it right now. And the things you can do to support trans people in Missouri are to direct resources, including funds, people, and visibility to the ACLU. The ACLU of Missouri, they have a state affiliate that does more local work. Promo, which is a queer rights organization in Missouri. And you can call your elected officials if you live in the United States. Whether you live in Missouri or not, you can call your officials and ask them to commit to helping to fight for queer and trans people in your state and in the country. We really need your help right now. So if you can, please do. If you can't, please tell other people too. Um, and you guys are just the best. Valerie, thank you so much for this interview. This has been a real joy.
Oh, no, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure, and we are all very excited to see what comes next for Sarah Gailey.
All right, cheers, everybody.
All right, thank you, and we'll see you around the convention and in Discord and other places. So thanks, everyone.